All right, buckle up, sports fans, because on today's deep dive, we're going deep into the trenches of football history.
Into the trenches, huh? I like that.
Well, we are talking about defensive line, so it's only fitting.
That's only fitting.
We're going to untangle a story about a legendary defensive line known as the sack exchange and a controversial NFL record that still has folks talking.
Oh, yeah. This one's got it all. Amazing athleticism, broken records, and a confrontation years in the making.
And this isn't just about some stats in a record book, is it?
Not at all. It gets into legacy, the weight of expectations, the blurry lines between sportsmanship and ambition. It makes you wonder how a single play, a moment frozen in time, can echo for years and even lead to personal confrontations decades later.
Really makes you think, yeah. It's like this story transcends the game itself. Says something about how we view success, how we handle competition, and how we grapple with the past.
Absolutely. But before we get too philosophical, let's set the stage.
Good idea. At the center of this whole saga is Mark Gastineau, a dominant force on the Jets' defensive line back in the early 80s.
Right, and to understand Gastineau's impact, we need to picture the NFL scene back then. Defenses were getting more and more aggressive, and the Jets' sack exchange was a major part of that shift. This wasn't just a group of talented guys. This unit changed defensive strategy.
I've heard the name sack exchange, of course, but honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on what made them so special. Could you break that down for me?
You bet. Picture this. A four-man defensive line. So all four players right there on the line of scrimmage, their main goal to disrupt the offense. This group, Gastineau, Joe Klecko, Marty Lyons, and Abdul Salam, they were famous for their relentless pressure on the quarterback, penetrating the offensive line, and obviously those sacks.
Right, and for anyone who needs a refresher, a sack is when a defensive player tackles the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage before he can throw the ball. Huge momentum shifter in a game, and often a sign of a seriously tough defense.
Absolutely. A sack can completely turn the tide of a game. And the sack exchange, they were a force of nature, aggressive, relentless, totally revolutionized defensive play. They influenced tactics across the league, even led to rule changes to protect quarterbacks from all that pressure.
Wow, so they were truly game changers.
Yeah.
And Gastineau, he was at the heart of it all, right?
He was. Gastineau was known for his incredible speed and power, a total nightmare for quarterbacks. And in 1984, he did something truly amazing. He set the single-season sack record, 22 sacks. Just think about that.
22 sacks. That's unbelievable. Can't even imagine the athleticism, the sheer determination to pull that off.
Yeah.
And this record stood for how long? Almost 2 decades, right?
Yep, 17 years, Gastineau's record went untouched, a real testament to his dominance in that era. But then in 2001, along comes Michael Strahan, formidable defensive end for the New York Giants, and he's on track to break Gastineau's long-standing record.
This is where things take a turn, isn't it? It goes beyond the sport itself and becomes about perception, competition, the way one moment can be seen in such different ways.
You got it. And it all hinges on the final game of the 2001 season. Strahan needs just one more sack to tie Gastineau's record. The tension is insane. Imagine being Strahan in that moment. The weight of history on his shoulders, knowing every single play could define his whole legacy.
Talk about pressure. And, as fate would have it, the Giants are playing the Green Bay Packers, led by none other than Brettfavre, the quarterback known for his toughness, his ability to escape even the most relentless pass rush.
And here's where the controversy kicks in. In the last moments of the game, Strahan sacks Favre, gets his 22.5th sack of the season, officially breaking Gastineau's record. But almost immediately, the whispers start. People questioning if that final record-breaking sack was legitimate.
Hold on, what do you mean? Why all the controversy around the sack?
Simply put, a lot of people thought Favre took a dive. In football terms, taking a dive means intentionally falling or giving yourself up, basically, to avoid a harder tackle.
So people were saying Favre intentionally went down easy to let Strahan get the record.
Yep, that's the heart of the controversy. People scrutinized the replays of that final play. Some said Favre barely put up a fight, while others argued he was just a veteran quarterback avoiding unnecessary contact at the end of a game.
Wow, so this record, what should have been a moment of pure celebration, becomes shrouded in doubt. And to make it even more complicated, Strahan himself wasn't comfortable with the situation.
He wasn't. Here's Strahan, a guy who'd earned his place among the best defensive players, and he's in this awkward spot. Thrilled to get the record, of course, but the idea that it was somehow given to him cast a shadow over it. He even said publicly that he felt the controversy diminished his achievement.
Totally understandable. It's like having your greatest triumph tainted by the suspicion that you didn't entirely earn it. And in the middle of all this, there's Mark Gastineau, the guy whose record was broken. What was his reaction to all this?
Well, here's where things get really interesting. Gastineau was actually at that game in 2001 when Strahan broke his record. And in what seemed like a really classy move, he went onto the field and congratulated Strahan. Seemed to accept the outcome gracefully.
So on the surface, it looked like he was putting the rivalry aside, acknowledging Strahan's achievement. But as they say, appearances can be deceiving. And I'm guessing this is where we leave it for now.
For now, yes. We've set the stage, introduced the key players, established the controversy around that record-breaking sack. What we haven't gotten into yet is the long shadow this event cast, the resentment simmering beneath the surface, and the eventual confrontation that brought all those emotions to the forefront. You know, you might be thinking, why didn't Gastineau say something right away? If he felt the record was broken unfairly, why wait?
A good question.
It really gets to the heart of how complex our emotions are and how they change over time.
Right. It's not always easy to process those feelings right when something happens, especially when it's something so personal like a record that's tied to your whole legacy.
Exactly. Sometimes it takes a while for the full impact to really sink in.
Makes sense.
And for Gastineau, that processing took almost 20 years.
Wow, 20 years.
We have to remember, for a lot of athletes, records are more than just numbers on a page. They represent years of dedication, sacrifice, pushing themselves to be the best. To have that achievement questioned, that symbol of all your hard work, well, it can really shake you.
It's like having a part of who you are being challenged.
Exactly. And for Gastineau, that feeling of unfairness, it festered for years and eventually led to a very public, very dramatic confrontation.
So he didn't stay silent forever.
He didn't. In 2020, Gastineau finally spoke out. He went public with his belief that Favre had, in fact, taken a dive. He talked about his frustration, the resentment that had been building up all those years.
So it wasn't just about a record anymore.
No, it was about respect, about feeling like his achievement was diminished, like his legacy had been tarnished.
It sounds like this tension had been simmering for years, and it finally reached a boiling point.
It did, and it didn't end there.
It didn't.
Things get even more intense in 2023. Imagine this, a memorabilia show. Seems harmless enough, right? Fans, former players, all getting together. Gastineau and Favre are both there. And in a moment, caught on video, Gastineau walks right up to Favre and confronts him. Accuses him of costing him the record. Lays out all that hurt he's been carrying for nearly 2 decades.
Whoa, so this wasn't just a casual run-in. This was a full-on confrontation for everyone to see. What did they say to each other? Do we know?
We do. The video's out there. You can see Gastineau visibly agitated, walking up to Favre and saying, "I'm gonna get my sack back, dude." The emotion in his voice is raw. He goes on to say, "You hurt me. You really hurt me, Brett."
It's clear this is about so much more than just the record.
Wow.
This is about pride, legacy, a feeling of betrayal that had been eating at him for years.
Almost like watching a train wreck in slow motion, you know? You know something bad's about to happen, but you can't look away.
And to add to the drama, Marty Lyons, another member of that legendary sack exchange, he was actually at the memorabilia show. He tried to step in. He did.
Yeah. Later, Leon said he saw this crazed look in Gastineau's eye. Like he was on a mission to confront Favre no matter what.
Wow.
It just shows you how deeply Gastineau felt about this, how much this whole thing had affected him.
It's a good reminder that behind those larger-than-life athletes we see on TV, there are real people with real emotions and real stories.
Absolutely. So what about Favre? How did he react to all this?
Yeah, how do you handle that?
Well, in the video, Favre seems pretty taken aback by Gastineau's intensity. He tries to downplay the situation, but Gastineau's not having it. He wants Favre to acknowledge the pain he caused, how his actions tarnished his legacy, maybe even cost him opportunities beyond football.
It's like this clash of personalities, right? You have Gastineau consumed by this feeling of injustice, and then you have Favre who maybe at the time didn't really understand the magnitude of his actions. And then to make things even more complicated, Gastineau's wife, Joanne, she actually apologized to Favre after the whole incident, tried to smooth things over, explain her husband's behavior.
She did. It was a gesture of, trying to make peace, to bridge the gap between these two men who are now caught up in this emotional whirlwind. But of course, the story doesn't end there. Favre addressed the incident on social media, gave his side of the story.
He did. What did he say?
He called it a dust-up, trying to downplay how intense it was. He said he never meant to hurt Gastineau and that he regretted how it all played out.
Interesting.
And here's the thing that really struck me. Favre admitted that back in 2001, he didn't fully grasp what the record really meant, not just in terms of the sport, but beyond that.
You mean like the financial impact?
Exactly. He talked about how losing the record might have cost Gastineau money, endorsements, maybe even affected his chances of getting into the Hall of Fame.
It's a good point. It shows how much pro sports has changed. The stakes are so much higher now.
Definitely. Favre seemed to realize that his actions, whether intentional or not, might have had consequences that went way beyond the football field, consequences he hadn't even considered at the time.
Makes you think, right?
Yeah.
Even seemingly small actions can have these ripple effects, especially in a world where sports and money are so intertwined.
Absolutely. But wait, before we get too philosophical, there's one more twist to the story.
Another twist. Come on.
I know, right? It's like a soap opera. In 2021, TJ Watt, a star player for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he ties Strahan's record, 22.5 sacks. Adds another name to this whole saga.
It's like this record is cursed or something. Just when you think things are settled, something else comes along to shake things up again.
Right. So now we have this legendary record, accusations of a dive, a confrontation years in the making, and then another player ties the record, just complicating the narrative even more. It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
It really makes you question how much weight we should give to individual records in team sports, especially when their legitimacy is being questioned.
Yeah.
Does Gastineau have a right to be upset all these years later, or should he just move on?
Tough questions.
No easy answers, but it's worth thinking about. This whole story has really gotten me thinking about the bigger picture, about legacy, competition, the unpredictability of it all.
Me too.
And there's no single right answer here. It's about recognizing different perspectives, understanding how complex emotions are, and realizing how one event can have such a lasting impact on everyone involved.
This whole thing has been a roller coaster.
Right.
Like a sports drama unfolding both on and off the field. And it makes me wonder, is there even such a thing as a truly, clean record in pro sports? I mean, there are always going to be things we can't control, things we can't fully account for, right?
That's a really interesting question. It gets to the heart of how complex sports are. Individual achievements are often tied up with team dynamics, external factors, even luck.
Luck, yeah, you can't forget about that.
You can't. It's impossible to take the human element out of the equation, which means there's always room for interpretation, debate, and, controversy.
Always going to be some debate.
Always. We can analyze the stats, break down the replays, argue about motivations, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be that element of subjectivity, that what if that just hangs around. And in this story, time itself adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Like we've seen, perspectives can change over time. What might have felt like a totally sportsmanlike gesture in the moment, well, years later, it can be seen through a different lens, one of disappointment, resentment. And for Gastineau, those feelings grew stronger over the years, especially with the way pro sports has changed.
It's true. When Gastineau set that record back in '84, the money in the NFL was totally different. Endorsements, memorabilia, the whole idea of an athlete's earning potential, it wasn't as big a deal back then.
Exactly. Favre himself admitted that back in 2001, he didn't really think about the financial side of things. And that leads to another question. How much do these individual records really matter when sports and business are so deeply connected?
Right. It's like we're trying to balance two different worlds. On the one hand, the pure pursuit of athletic excellence, and on the other, the cold, hard reality of the business side of sports.
It is a balancing act, and this whole story highlights how important it is to be aware of those consequences, even when you're in the middle of competition. Sportsmanship is more than just following the rules. It's about empathy, respecting your opponent, and realizing that your choices can have a wider impact.
You said it. It's not just about winning or losing. It's about how you handle yourself, how you treat the other players, and remembering that we're all human, even in a world that's obsessed with stats and results.
So for everyone listening, this is where you come in. What stands out to you? What do you think about the role of individual records in team sports? Does Gastineau have a right to still be upset, or should he let it go?
Some food for thought there. This deep dive, it's been a wild one, full of twists and turns, and it's really gotten us thinking.
It has.
We've explored this legendary defensive line, a controversial record, and a confrontation years in the making. And we've touched on some deeper truths about competition, about how pro sports has evolved, and the power of human emotion.
We've seen how one single moment can have this ripple effect, shaping legacies and sparking debates that go on and on.
It's amazing.
And in the end, it's up to each of us to figure out what it all means, to challenge our own ideas, to find our own answers in the gray areas where sports, business, and the human spirit all come together.
So there you have it, the saga of the sack exchange. A controversial record and a confrontation that still has people talking. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another look into the stories that shape our world.